Welcome to the Nervous System Care and Healing Podcast, where we talk about how to take care of ourselves in mind, in body, in spirit, while we navigate systems that were designed to keep us dysregulated. I'm your host, Liz, a neurodivergent therapist of color, and I'm really glad that you're here. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest, Mari. We start by talking about her journey from being in recovery to becoming a therapist who integrates psychedelic medicines with ancestral work, spiritual work, and somatic trauma therapy. She shares her very honest thoughts about the psychedelic medicine field and why we need to move away from capitalistic systems that focus on profit, extraction, and endless consumption, and recenter Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous communities. We end up talking about why psychedelic medicines are not a magic pill or a quick fix that they're presented as in mainstream Western culture, but rather they're an invitation to look deeper into yourself and to practice being in relationship. So we discuss why psychedelic medicines, whether it is cannabis, ketamine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, or other plant teachers, are not for everyone, and how to discern if it's right for you. Finally, we go big picture and we talk about what it would mean to decenter capitalism and build relationships with medicines and with each other, with our communities, with the land and nature around us that are based on actual reciprocity and connection. Mari is a truly visionary human with so much wisdom. She's one of my brain spotting teachers, and I hope that this interview sparks something meaningful in you. We'll start by reading her bio so you can get a sense of her work. Mariya Javed-Payne is a licensed independent clinical social worker, licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and international brain spotting trainer and consultant. She is a somatic psychotherapist and the owner of Awaken Consulting Services, a private practice and consultancy where she utilizes brain spotting therapy and offers training and consultation on treating trauma, somatic psychotherapies, psychedelic-assisted therapy, and ancestral healing. The foundation of her work is decolonial and liberation-based. She is also the co-founder of Awakened Roots, a sanctuary and healing space where she offers breathwork, shamanic healing, and other earth-based wisdom offerings. She serves as a bridge between the mystical and the mainstream and has courageously supported thousands of therapists, healers, and individuals to embody their aliveness and potential. So thank you so much for being here, Mari.
Thanks for having me, Liz. It's always good to sit with you.
So wonderful. So as we're starting out here, I'm wondering if you could share with our listeners, your bio is such a depth of work that you do. I'm wondering what drew you to this work and why do you do this?
I think, like a lot of healers, my own journey in receiving healing led me to pursuing caring for other people, tending to other people. And it's something I think that I was raised with coming from India, this communal collective culture. My family was really, what really emphasized giving, giving and caring. And then when I went through a very long, dark night of the soul, if you want to call it that, that spanned actually like 16 years, including addiction, I was on the receiving end of rehab, treatment, psychotherapy, and then moving also into more holistic healing methods. And this was all, before age 20, 21. So those like 8 years of really heavy duty opiate addiction and addiction to crack cocaine had me in the system. I learned about the system. I learned it from the inside, what it was like to be a recipient. And then when it was time, to go to go to school and kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life, being a therapist was really the pull and the draw was to be able to connect with other people, help, and also because I could relate so much. That's what sparked it was, you have the ancestral, familial, those origins where culturally we're taught, to be collective and caring and communal. And then my own history, I found myself in those spaces where I needed care. I needed help. And I got to see what worked and what wasn't working. You know, got to feel it and be in the belly of the beast, so to speak.
And that offers such a unique perspective to be a recipient of the system's services or care and to see kind of maybe where some cracks in the system exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big ones. I slipped through. I actually didn't stay sober after 8 rehabs. So if I total out how much time I was locked away, it was like 2.5 years of my life in a center or different centers. So when I eventually did get sober in 2010, it was actually through more of a psychological break and was the beginning of becoming spiritually aware, or becoming aware of other realms. So that's, I got to see what was like not working in the system and then my own kind of experience grappling with my mental health led me to seek out other ways to help explain what was happening.
Yeah. And I know that, so much has happened since, going through the treatment programs to where you are now and the work that you do of actually being a psychedelic assisted therapist, trauma therapist. Could you share what are your thoughts right now on the psychedelic medicine field?
Wow, yeah, so, I mean, fast forwarding, a lot of years, it's kinda interesting. I never would have thought of myself back then that I would be working with medicines because, I think in the recovery culture, there's like a don't you don't do psychedelics, but what do I think of it now, 16 years into sobriety, 16 years into healing work, and then, formally doing psychedelic assisted therapy for the last like 4 or 5 years. I have a lot of pause, to be honest with you. I'm gonna share some unpopular opinions.
Go for it. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I'm really resistant actually towards this big wave, what we're calling the second wave of psychedelics and in the US and in America, it's really, really limited that view and very stripped of context. And this is what we see happening in colonialism and capitalistic structures is that context always gets stripped. It's always about, right now, instant gratification, consume culture. And so while I've been a beneficiary of, you know, plant medicines and entheogens and psychedelic medicines, and I have received so much healing. I really have received so much, and it's a huge part of my life. I'm also really disgusted by the proliferation of psychedelic assisted therapy and the way that it's being kind of rolled out. And I knew that that was going to happen. And it was why I was so hesitant to enter it from the mainstream realm. And it was through some of my own sitting with medicine and asking the medicines themselves about, like, well, what is my role in all of this? That I was told, well, it's going to happen anyway. So your voice of dissent may actually be useful here. What I'm dissenting about is not, don't use, I'm not saying don't go use medicines. What I'm saying is that the culture that we live in and we come from does not know how to be in relationship with really anything. We don't know how to be in relationship with each other, with nature, with other forms of life or non-life. And so then when you start to relate to medicines, or you ingest a medicine, these are spirits.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
require relationship. And if we come at it from consume culture, I think it's very, very damaging and not honoring of the ecosystem and the context that it comes from. And what I think happens then is that a couple of things. One, people keep going back for more and more and more and more. And that's our consumer culture. We need something outside of us to heal what's in us, and we need more of it constantly. And the second thing is that we can struggle to integrate what we experience if we don't have that rooted context. The history, the historical, the contextual, the origins, the rooted beginnings, following that thread all the way to this particular timeline that we're in. And so I see people going back, and it's like going back for more and more and more, but not really knowing how to truly integrate the work actively in the life that they're living.
And it
We
creates another addictive like cycle of always going back for more to fill a void that cannot be filled if we come at it from an extractive point of view.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that most of us, if you ask, you, me, or the next person, if they're an extractive person, they're gonna say, "No. No, of course I'm not." So that's the thing here, is that it isn't explicit so much. It's very hidden. It's like a hungry ghost that lives inside all of us that are in this culture, and it takes active inquiry to look at, well, how are my thoughts extractive? How are my emotions, behaviors oriented towards extraction? And to do that from a place of non-judgment also. So I'm not saying any of this to be shaming or blaming, but really about kind of accepting the nature of reality as we find it right now, and then working with where do we want to go and how do we want to get there.
Yeah. And this idea that we are all exposed to the mass conditioning, and that it does take active effort to decondition and unlearn and to relearn or remember a different way of relationship and reciprocity. Yeah.
Yeah, the remembering is more than 10,000 years ago, and it lives in us, and it's lifetimes of work. This is going to be lifetimes. It's never going to end in our lifetime. So,
Yeah. So I'm thinking about our Western context and being based here in the US, where we see talk of ketamine assisted psychotherapy as well as ketamine treatment. We see psilocybin assisted therapy. And then that there are also folks who are engaging with plant medicines like ayahuasca, whether that is traveling abroad or having a context here in the States to experience it. I'm wondering if you could speak to what would a decolonial approach to psychedelic medicines look like?
mm, first and foremost, the people that we would be actively centering would be the original stewards of these medicines.
Absolutely.
They would have the reins. They
Mhm.
would have the reins in our politics around psychedelic medicine. They would have the leading guidance to offer in how to shape this proliferation from more underground or indigenous or ceremonial contexts, and how to bridge it with the Western world. And it is so sad to me to see how that is always an afterthought.
Mhm. If it's
Um,
even included.
if it's
Yeah.
even included.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot more like maybe performative attempts. I'm seeing more of that. What I don't see is a willingness to surrender. A willingness to surrender the consuming, the consuming culture, the profiteering, and to say, I'm going to let you lead. I'm going to let you show us the way. And I think that's what could really change the ground of all of it. That would be true reciprocity and true repair work if we did it like that.
I can just hear the capitalists' voices of, oh, but then where would the profits be? Or would we make as much money, right? Because that's the lens that our Western systems are coming from.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
it's
agree.
really sad. Yeah. I also want to ask about, ancestral and spiritual work because I know that is such a foundation of just how you live, not just how you work, but how you live. And I'm wondering if you could share kind of how you see ancestral or spiritual work interacting with psychedelic medicine work, or just share more about that.
Sure. Spiritual work and ancestral work, probably the core orientations to how I meet the world and meet people in the healing context, really from a place of frequencies and energies. And all trauma work is ancestral work because trauma is passed down. So, again, with the Western context, it's been narrowed into like individual therapy. So, when someone comes in and you see somebody for a psychotherapy session and they share a problem with you, and then you have a diagnosis and all of that, what we're doing is like looking at it from a microscope versus the fuller picture. What we're not usually taught or trained is to see the biopsychosocial. I mean, we talk about that like we're trained biopsychosocial, right? You do those assessments and you look at how everything is connected, and that's great. But in actual application, because we have this narrow individualistic model, right? People aren't coming into therapy as families usually, or, larger constellations. So we're missing the boat there. And when we really start to look at people's suffering, we can see how that came from generations past. Most of like my suffering comes from systemic things that affected my ancestors, that affected my parents, that affects me. It's like all trickling down. So I think it's helpful to widen the lens to know that all the work that we're doing is actually ancestral work, and when you make that conscious, you are inviting in, not only the gravity that this is more than one person you're working with, but you're also inviting profound level of resources
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
come from the lineages that we are born from. So psychedelic work and how that relates, the medicines highlight our human historical wounding, you know, and there's absolutely connections to ancestors that can show up in medicine work, especially if you're keen to it, or you invite it, or you can have that awareness to bring that in. And in this way, it is quantum healing, it's going backwards and forwards, and it's having access in a way that we might not if we are not in a non-ordinary state of consciousness. So there's a lot of potential there to do high potency healing work, but again, in a container that can support that.
Yeah. It's reminding me how, with psychedelic medicines, when I've experienced them in my body, how such a non-ordinary state of consciousness, the veil between like this reality and like it gets thinner or it leaves entirely. And also like sense of time can really shift. And so it really highlights how, like, yes, the past is the past and this is the present, but it's actually all connected in kind of a wheel or a circle. And to your point, how that does open up access or gives us a doorway to step through. And then also what you said earlier about how if we really zoom out and see the big context, that it's not just like, here's an individual in distress. There is a family system, there's generations that go way back. And not only do we in our bodies hold the impacts of the intergenerational trauma, if there is that in our history, which most of us do, but also the intergenerational resources and like some of the resilience that we can inherit as well. And I'm I want to ask this for anyone who's listening who's like, oh yeah, like ancestral spiritual work, like that resonates with me, but maybe they haven't seen many examples of what that can look like. So I'm curious if you were just introducing someone to this idea or helping them remember really like how it could live in them. I'm curious about any practices or any ways that you really tap into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an ongoing process and learning. I'm still continuously learning and adding, like most of us probably are. We may have lost contact with who our ancestors were. We may not have even knowing of like what were their names and, where did we come from. So it starts with an opening there, just like being curious about it. And that can look like starting to research, asking family members about information. So that's like one of the ways that my journey started, was really inquiring. And sadly, my family really wasn't able to tell me that much. So I've relied heavily on the more intuitive, psychic, ritual work to also connect with my people. It's sort of like, if you haven't called somebody in a really long time, they might not like pick up the phone right away. They're like, "Oh, what's that rusty, dusty phone
Yeah.
in the corner with the
Yeah.
dial?"
Right,
Like,
like I didn't
whoa,
know that
that
was
phone's
plugged in.
ringing.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoa, I didn't even know it was plugged in. Right.
Yeah.
So they might not answer right away,
Yeah.
but it starts with asking. It's like asking for that connection and creating an ancestral altar is a really sweet way, and this does not need to be anything elaborate. This is simple. It can be a few mementos or things that represent your family lines, your lineages. So some of the work that I'm, coming from is I've learned from ancestralmedicine.org and Daniel Foor's work, Amber McSeal's work. That organization gives really good baseline information for people wanting to reconnect with their ancestors. So asking family about your people, and then an altar, and ask, every day, like we have an altar at our home, and every day there's a hello and a good morning that it's in our bedroom, and we like say hello to our ancestral altar, and the people that is representing will make offerings. We'll put a little cup of tea or honey or cardamom or other things that remind me of my home. And simple. It's simple as saying, I wish you well. Doesn't need to be this like elaborate thing. I wish you well and I want to connect with you. I want to connect with the wise and the well of my lineage. So simple things like that would be what I do with clients that are interested in reconnecting. And then there's like the more elaborate, psychic intuitive ritual work that we might do, specifically if there's unwell ancestors that are lingering or hanging around where there's unfinished business. So I do a lot of psychopomp work. I can speak to the dead and help them cross over. If there's like family illnesses or things that have been passed down, patterns, emotional patterns, we can work on a somatic and psychospiritual level to unpack and undo and unwind that, and liberate not just what's happening for the individual, but also the non-human, not in a physical body, the family members that might still be impacted by these intergenerational threads of trauma. So it's a mix of like psychotherapy, shamanic work, intuitive work, communication between realms, and most of all, my way of doing the work is actually to teach you how to do it. Because I think that that is the most empowering thing, is when we can learn how to do it ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't need help. I don't want to be anyone's guru.
Mm,
I don't want to take people's sovereignty and be put on a pedestal like, oh, hey, I want to really be in relationship with folks so that they can learn how to access those states themselves and to do so in a way that feels grounded and protected.
yeah. And that's something that I feel like is a green flag about you, that you are very firmly not about being someone's guru or the be all know all expert, that you really honor your teachers, honor every person's wisdom, and also like really own like your knowledge and expertise. But, that's one of the things I see happening in the psychedelic therapy field, right? Of people it happens every meditation mindfulness of like, yeah, I know everything and I'm going to impart this on you. To really decolonize is to say, actually, we maybe all have something to learn from each other. No one here is better or superior than anyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's real risk to losing our sovereignty. And
Yeah.
I've given mine away many times, which is how I've learned that hard lesson of don't be anyone's guru.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm noticing that as you were describing the ancestral spiritual work, how you integrate that into your work with people, that like it kind of is describing a psychedelic like experience, though medicines may or may not be involved. I'm wondering if you could share more about if you did have a client who was considering exploring psychedelic medicines like ketamine assisted psychotherapy, what would you want them to consider? Because it's not right for everyone, but like, how would you really hold someone through that process of deciding and discerning?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of the conversations I have with people are about sovereignty and about surrender. If you're going to have a more impactful experience with medicines, you need to know how to surrender. And our society sucks at that.
No, yeah, we grab and we hold, like, and squeeze and grasp. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. We cling, right? You have to
yeah.
pry our fingers off of
Yeah.
whatever it is we're holding on to. So I also want to inquire about where's the interest coming from? Is it coming from this is a hot topic and it's the newest trend? Or is it coming from being called, right? Being called from a deeper place inside of you that's saying, I want to explore my inner terrain. I want to know myself. I want to know myself in a deeper way. I want to know what's been like in the shadows for me or the places that I feel really stuck. And often it's both. It's like, oh, this is a hot topic right now and people are suffering and they are struggling and they're not getting the solutions in the current systems that we have. The medical and mental health industrial complexes don't offer true, long-term solutions. A lot of it is quick fix. So it's talking to them about, well, where is it coming from? And right away I'll say to folks, this is not a magic bullet.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's not a magic bullet. If you have any inclinations about that, you want to put that aside because the real work actually happens after the psychedelic journey.
Right.
That's just
Yeah,
the door. It's just the door
yeah,
getting opened,
yeah.
making sense of the experience, getting through the experience. Doing psychedelics is basically saying, I'm going to go out of my window of tolerance.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's basically like, yeah, I
yeah,
am choosing to move into a state that highly likely I will be out of my window of tolerance.
yeah.
Um, we need to we need to be okay with that kind of commitment and surrender and have the right support in place too. Or an understanding of that kind of the train of the psyche. So those are usually the things that I'll broach with clients, and then it might again, it's like figuring out, well, what medicine might be supportive to you. Is it ketamine? Is it another plant ally? And also, there are many other ways to access non-ordinary states. You mentioned it. You're like, it sounds like what you're doing is psychedelic work without medicine. Absolutely. I feel like I'm on a journey every single day. Like
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
do the work, I don't need the
Yeah.
medicine to do that. When you
Mhm.
learn how to travel into different, domains and dimensions, it's quite similar, to that terrain. So that's the other thing that I hope people will understand is that breath work, meditation, journeying, working. But lately, I've been working a lot with flower essences, and that's vibrational medicine. And I can go into altered states with working with flower essences. They're so subtle, but they're so potent. So there's many, many ways. It doesn't have to be ayahuasca. It can be cannabis. It can be,
Yeah.
mushrooms. And I just want to say this. This is like a personal opinion. Some of these more, master teacher plants, I believe because they're limited resources, they take, 15 years to like cultivate an mature ayahuasca plant. It takes, hundreds of pounds of plant material to make a small batch of ayahuasca. There's real risk for ecological demise. It's happening as we speak. And so my thought is if you're new and you're interested, why not work with cannabis? Why not work with mushrooms to help clear out the layers of crust that are
Mhm.
on all of us? So then eventually you might be ready to do something more with a master teacher plant, and the teacher plant won't have to get in and work out the crust, and can then actually go in and work really deeply with the deeper material, because otherwise it's having to move through all of the gunk that we might be carrying around. And cannabis is very underrated. She's
Yeah.
really been demonized. That's a whole other podcast we could do on that. But cannabis, I've had journeys with cannabis and experienced almost equal results and support and healing as like an ayahuasca experience. So it all just depends.
E exactly. Yeah. And there's so much that I'm appreciating in what you're saying. That first, just that discernment of what is your why of wanting to do this, and just checking that it's coming from a place where it would make sense to continue with the path, and the ecological climate considerations. I know that when I've engaged with the world of ayahuasca and the indigenous people who steward it, there really is this sense of like our goal is not to have everyone in the world drink ayahuasca. That doesn't need to happen. Like there is still a ripple effect if one person experiences this medicine and carries those teachings back to their home and their community. And then your point about like we also don't need to shoot for like and it's not even like this is the least intense and this is the most intense. Everything is what it is in the way it interacts with your nervous system in that moment. So someone could have the most a deep journey with cannabis and also not feel anything at all with ayahuasca, right? So exploring what would make most sense based on like what you need, and don't think we just had to jump to the most intense seeming thing right away.
That is
Yeah.
the real risk of our society, is the go big or go home. It's to do the thing that is, the coolest or most in. And if we go back to the very beginning of our conversation when we were talking about relationship,
Hmm.
we want to meet these medicines in relationship. And so if you're going to go into the inner temple, it's wise to wash your feet.
Hmm.
And and I see the some of these medicines grow in great profundity. It's there, cannabis is such a gift to our world. She offers so many ways to work, and there's so much healing that she can offer that's accessible, right?
Yes.
And so if we work with that, we're also then holding the context of that ecology of respecting, how to work with something that's rare. And again, it's like not gatekeeping. If your heart calls you to grandmother ayahuasca or grandfather iboga, go. but listen in your heart first, and also tune into where's the hungry ghost in you, because we all have it. We all have the hungry ghost. And so you ask, is this the hungry ghost talking? And usually it's some kind of blend. So how do you unpack that? It's useful to not move with urgency.
Just one of the most important reminders and teachings and the prep work of, okay, am I being urgent and rushing this, or am I approaching this process with intention and letting myself slow down and just be? And like, even that is a way the medicine can teach us before we've ever consumed it on our lips. We've really touched on ancestral past, how do we navigate the present, and just all of the toxicity in the systems we live in. What kind of future do you envision, or are you building toward, as we see systems collapse around us and the empire falling? And we are recording this in April of 2026 for everyone's context.
Yeah, yeah. What a time to exist.
Yeah.
My prayer and deepest wish is, and this, it's not passive, it's a very active prayer, active through my hands, active through my feet, active through spoken word and action each day, is living in community with people, different races, different backgrounds, different abilities. And I see it being small governance. I see us taking care of each other like villages and care networks. I pray every day for the dissolving of greed from like all humans,
Mhm.
and that we're not just taking care of each other, but we are taking care of our living earth, and that there's a reconnection with that cycle of life, cycle of nature, cycle of life and death, returning to that remembrance. That's what I dream about. And that's what we're doing here on the land that we've been given this opportunity to steward, as building a space where healing can happen, and that we grow our own food, and we live in this loop that's honoring every stage of what it means to be alive, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional, the relational, and communal. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, it really feels
Yeah,
like that.
so
The wheel of time, too, of how the future is also returning to our roots, and just the way that most of humanity lived for quite a while before we got capitalized and started outsourcing the village. Could you share with us, where can people find you if they're interested in connecting with you, learning from you, or working with you?
sure. Yeah. I mostly do group offerings at this point in time. I'm working on more things since we've gotten here to this land and figuring out what the land wants. So there's more to come, but you can find more about me and find more about my partner as well, who I do a lot of this work with. His name is Greg, at awakenconsultingservices.com, or our sibling company, which is awakened-roots.com. And we've got events and individual offerings and group offerings and retreats as well. So looking forward to connecting.
Thank you so much, Mari. This has been such a pleasure, and really just dipping the toe in the water of this conversation. But for our audience, I hope it's a thought provoking and heart opening kind of glimpse into a different way of remembering and being. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nervous System Care and Healing Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. And if you ever have a few minutes to leave a rating and review, it would mean so much to me, and it helps other people to find the podcast and spread the care. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy, coaching, or professional mental health services. The information shared here is generalized, it may not reflect every individual nuance, and it should not be interpreted as personalized mental health advice. So please do seek out additional support if you need it. Take care and be well. This is Liz at Nervous System Care and Healing.